Aleichem, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. For those who don't know, my name is Rabbi Kesselman. I am the director of Mochin Smicha, and it's before I start the actual presentation, I would like to pass the proverbial microphone over to Rabbi Mendel Prescott. Rabbi Mendel Prescott is the Rosh Yeshiva and also Sholem Yeshiva of Mochin Smicha, who can introduce himself and talk a little bit about what it is that the Chevra here are undertaking. So, Rabbi Prescott, whenever you're ready, you can take it away.
Thank you, Rabbi Kesselman. It's really what we're beginning tonight is something that we're going to be doing over the entire course of the years, the limud of Hilchos Shabbos. There's something miyuchad from the Torah itself all the way down to the Rishonim and Achronim about the learning of Hilchos Shabbos. The only time that Moshe Rabbeinu gathered all of the Jewish people to teach them, from Har Sinai until V'zos HaBracha, is Parshas Vayakil. Every other time that Moshe taught halacha, there was a process. It was through Aaron, through Shivim Zikenim. When Moshe directly taught Klal Yisrael halacha, was Parshas Vayakil. And what was taught there? Hilchos Shabbos. The Medrash says why Dafka Shabbos was taught. Everybody came to hear Shabbos. Everybody came to learn Shabbos directly. So first of all, that alone, the fact that Hilchos Shabbos was the one that the Torah saw fit, that Moshe Rabbeinu saw fit to gather everybody, is a Musar Haskell for us about the importance, the wichtigkeit of limud of Hilchos Shabbos. Additionally, the Medrash tells us that the reason why this was done was that Kol Ish should be able to be melamed as basically the halachas of Shabbos. When we're learning Hilchos Shabbos, it's not just a limud for ourselves, but there's an achrayus that comes with it. The Maharsha discusses this clearly in Masechta Shabbos, on Daf Kuf Yotes Amud Beis. The Maharsha there speaks about the obligation of Talmidei Chachamim to learn Hilchos Shabbos, to be oisik in Hilchos Shabbos. The Rishonim, Achronim point out that it's a kal v'chomer. All other halachas we have to learn Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag. Before Pesach, everybody's going to shiurim and Yonah D'Yoma, Sukkos, Shavuos. We're even going to hear this famous shir, the Marshal, about not the Shalah, about not making Kiddush early, about not davening Ma'ariv Leil Shavuos. Every Shabbos there's a moed that comes. Shabbos Mikri Moed. You have to learn the halachas of Shabbos. We have to be holding in the halachas of Shabbos. I say about the two Gedolim of the previous generation, Moshe Feinstein and Rav Hirschsprung from Montreal, that every Shabbos they would sit and learn Masechta Shabbos. They would finish the entire Masechta because it was in Yonah D'Yoma. We know the Chavetz Chaim would learn Hilchos Shabbos every day. They say that the Stipler once said, based off of Magen Mishnah, Magen Mishnah's introduction writes that the first limud that a person has to learn is Hilchos Shabbos. So the Stipler writes, in the yeshivas we don't do this. He says it's only because in order to understand Torah, you have to learn Nashim Nezikim, you have to learn the Sugyos, you have to learn how to be Medam Milsa Milsa. But Be'emes, he's right. Be'emes, the first limud is Hilchos Shabbos. The most wichtige limud is Hilchos Shabbos. A Talmud Chacham is called Shabbos. We live a life of Shabbos. We have an opportunity to live Shabbos the whole week by the limud of Hilchos Shabbos. The Ramban learns out that Zachar Siyam HaShabbos means to learn the halachas of Shabbos. So it's a tremendous opportunity, both in terms of how we relate to other people, the Maharsha, Rabbeinu Yoina also, that there's a chiyuv of a Talmud Chacham to know Shabbos. It's the first limud, it's a connection in Yonah D'Yoma. It's a way we connect to who we are as B'nai Torah, to learn Shabbos, to live a life of Shabbos, a kedusha of Shabbos. Somebody that lives their week with Shabbos, it's a different week.
Shkoyach, thank you very much, Rabbi Prescott. All right, so on that note, let me, in fact, do that. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go through a presentation. Just give me 1 second. All right, so the presentation, what we're going to go through is the Teudas B'Kiyot Hilchos Shabbos course, the Shabbos certification program presented by myself, Rabbi Prescott, and what was also going to be Rabbi Silverstein, but he is, who many of you have spoken with, the administrator of Mochin Smicha, but he's actually in Eretz Yisrael, and he did not make it. All right, so let's move right along. All right, so let's just discuss what we're going to cover throughout the course of the presentation. So the first, we heard a few words from Rabbi Prescott. We did that. Now we'll talk a little bit about the program itself, who it's for. We'll talk about the topics that are covered in the program. We'll talk about what Mochin Smecha has to offer, meaning what you're going to expect, what you can expect from us through the course of your learning. We'll talk about the Shulchan Aruch books that we've sent out. We'll talk about the schedule. We'll talk about the shiurim, and we'll also talk about how you should go about your learning and how tests work, as well as how the account on our website. If I have time at the end, I'll just run through it quickly. All right, so let's jump right in. All right, so ultimately, so this what we're calling the Shabbos certification program. What is it, and who is it for? So Rabbi Prescott, touched on the importance of Hilchos Shabbos, but I would, so I will not go through the first one that I mentioned here, but the second point, I just want to bring out that when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, there are many, 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 many Svarim and Poskim, and one could really spend their entire life learning Hilchos Shabbos. And therefore, obviously, when we were designing this and writing this program, we had to, tafasta mirubaloy tafasta. If we try and cover everything, we're not going to cover anything. But we also want to present as robust and as comprehensive of a program as possible, which is why we're not covering the entire Hilchos Shabbos, right? That would take it's over 100 simonim. That would take way longer than a year. As well as we, after much back and forth, much deliberation, settled on that the structure of the program, the fundamental building blocks of the program, in addition to obviously the Shulchan Aruch, the Mechaber Amah, are the four poskim, the Taz, Mogan, Avram, Shulchan Aruch, Harav, and Mishnah Berurah. Now, that's not to say we don't bring in other poskim. Obviously, we do, including that which came before the Shulchan Aruch, like Rabbi Prescott was mentioning before, whether it's a Mishnah, Gemara, Machlokes Rishonim, Turbes Yosef, Darkei Moshe, V'chulu, whether it's other Noise Kalim on the Shulchan Aruch, Pri Megadim, Pischei Teshuva, Rabbi Kiva Eger, V'chulu, and as well as contemporary poskim, right? Bringing everything down, halacha l'maaseh, Reb Shlomo Zalman, Reb Moshe, Reb Avadia, v'chulu, Shemini Shabbos kehilchasa, etc. But fundamentally, when you're thinking about the program, what is to be learned, then what we're talking about really is Taz, Mogan, Avram, Mishnah Berurah, and Shulchan Aruch Harav. We really feel that that's the best way to get a good handle on the topics we intend to cover, and which is different to Smicha, by the way. In the Smicha program, the fundamentals are Mechaber Amah, Shach, and Taz. But when it comes to Hilchos Shabbos, it's not enough to learn a Taz in the Magen Avram. Ultimately, the way Shabbos is kept, nowadays in the Tafshin Pei Vav is very different than the way it was, when the Noise Kalim were written, and that's somewhat different to Smicha, to Yeridea, where the fundamentals of cooking are still the same. So therefore, it's more important. It is important that we bring in additional contemporary poskim, which was why we did it this way. And one other point that I would mention is that some people are going to be using this Shabbos program as a pre-Smicha program, and some people are using it as a post-Smicha program. It functions perfectly as either one. So some people will have Smicha already, and now they're looking to advance their limudim, learning Hilchos Shabbos, and some people are not. Perhaps they don't feel like they're yet ready for Smicha, and they want to learn Hilchos Shabbos first. It is perfectly fine either way. Both are totally good. All right, let's move to talk a little bit about the curriculum of the program. So as I mentioned before, there's no way we could cover the entire Hilchos Shabbos. So what we settled on is 10 core areas, 10 core topics in Hilchos Shabbos. These are them: Hadlakas Neiros, Kiddush, Sudas, Havdalah, Tfilas, Bishul, Muktzah, Boirer, Refu, and Amir Lenochri. As I assume some of you could guess already, the first 5 are much more straightforward than the second 5. So which is good because it rounds out the program in a big way, right? So the first 5 units are just more general halachas, more straightforward things about learning Hilchos Shabbos, and then the second half of the program is really when we get into perhaps we could call it the halachic weeds, or the meat and potatoes of Hilchos Shabbos, bishul, muktzah, amir lenachri, boyer. These are real heavy sugyas, which Be'ezrus Hashem will make a seder out of them. Okay, what does Mochin Smicha offer? Meaning, you're joining this program. What can you expect from us throughout the course of your learning? So the first thing is an account on our website, which I'll go through in a moment. There's also a schedule, which I'll also go through. There's shiurim, which I'll go through, translated and explained Shulchan Aruch. Access to teachers for questions and discussions, review questions and quizzes, tests, a group WhatsApp chat, and a Tu'udas B'Kiyos upon successfully completing the program. Right? Those are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 things. But let's go through them a shtickle more in detail. So let's talk about the translate and explain Shulchan Aruch. Right? This is ultimately, this is what makes Machin Smicha special. I don't believe that any such thing exists in the world. There is no translation of the Shulchan Aruch, especially not in this format. So this is what this forum looked like on the outside, somewhat on the inside, and then this is what a page of Shulchan Aruch looks like in our Sfarim. Now, I actually want to take a few minutes to go through this because this is very important. So on the right side of every page, you'll see there's the layout of the Shulchan Aruch, and on the left side is the English. Now, on the right side, this layout of the Shulchan Aruch is completely new. We redid this, we own this layout, etc. And it has a few unique features that I want to go through. First of all, we removed all the Rashi letters, so it's clear text. Regular. We bought text from a publishing house that has gone through the text, edited out all the mistakes, etc. So this is very good text of the Shulchan Aruch, and we laid it out in such a way that it's clear, etc. So that goes for Mechaber Amah, Taz, and Magen Avram on the side. Then underneath that, you see the Be'er HaGoyla. That gives you the Mar Mekomis, the sources for where the Shulchan Aruch and the Noisa Kalim are coming from. Then underneath that, you see a section. I know it's a little bit hard to read in this image, but it's called Siyunim LaShulchan Aruch Harav. This is a brand new section that we have, if I can use the word invented, then I will, that our writing team has invented for the Shulchan Aruch. But I'm going to come back to it in a second to explain what it is. Let me first go through the Mishnah Berurah. We have also included the Mishnah Berurah on the page, which is also a unique feature that I don't know if there are any other Shulchan Aruchs that have the Mishnah Berurah on the page, including Taz and Magen Avram. Again, because the goal of the program is the 4 poskim. In addition to Shulchan Aruch, Taz, Magen Avram, Mishnah Berurah, Shulchan Aruch Harav. So we want to provide a one address. You open our Sefer and you have everything you need to be able to learn, besides the Alter Rebbe, which I'll get to in a second. So this is the Mishnah Berurah, the Biur Halacha, and the Sharat Zion, all on the page, which makes for a very geschmacka learning. Very unique feature, very exciting. I assume that as a result of this, many other publishing houses will probably adopt this kind of layout as well. Now, let's just go back to a second to this section called Siyunim LaShulchan Aruch Harav. So as I mentioned before, there's 4 poskim that we're building the program around. Taz, Magen Avram, Mishnah Berurah, Shulchan Aruch Harav. Now the problem is that whereas the Taz, the Magen Avram, and the Mishnah Berurah are all commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch Harav is not a commentary on the Shulchan Aruch. So we were faced with the dilemma of how do we incorporate the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, the Shulchan Aruch Harav. It didn't make sense to run it on the page because it doesn't line up with the Shulchan Aruch. So we invented this section, which is called Siyunim, the Shulchan Aruch Harav. For each seif in the Shulchan Aruch, it tells you what are the relevant seifim in the Shulchan Aruch Harav, in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, which makes for really geschmack limud, because you learn the Shulchan Aruch, you learn the Taz, you learn the Magen Avram, you learn the Mishnah Berurah, and then you see the Siyunim, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and you're able to learn those exact seifim in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. By the way, this is different to this is an upgrade from our Shulchan Aruch, our Smicha Shulchan Aruch, our Dayanos Shulchan Aruch. These are new features. All right, that's on the Hebrew side. Let's move to the English side. On the English side is broken up into 4 parts. Every halacha has 4 parts. There's an introduction to every seif, which has all the necessary background, any relevant Mishnah, Gemara, Machlokes Rishonim, Turbes Yosef, Darkei Moshe, v'chul. Any concept that you need to know is brought down in the introduction to the halacha to basically bring you up to speed when you're learning the Shulchan Aruch, so you have all the context that you need. The second thing is the translation of the halachas. Very straightforward. Mechaber Amah, bold for direct translation, not bold for indirect translation, and then there's little, clauses that introduce the topics that break up the halacha into chunks. The third section is discussions and explanations. This is, going through again Taz, Magen Avram, Mishnah Berurah, Shulchan Aruch Harav, all in English, and any other Noisa Kalim that are relevant, any other poskim, halacha l'maisa. This is always going to be the longest, most in-depth section called discussions and explanations. And also the 4th section, which is called sources and notes, which is additional marmakoimus, more complicated machlokes, more nuanced discussions amongst the poskim, etc., which you should definitely learn. One thing that I would point out is that as it relates to the test or the tests, you don't need to know the sources and notes. Everything else you do need to know. All right. Let's move on to. Oh, there are 4 volumes for the program. So you've all received the first one, and you'll receive the second, the third, and the fourth in due course. Okay, let's talk about the learning schedule. This is what it looks like. It's very straightforward. It's a weekly schedule. So you can see here, Shabbos certification program schedule, Mochen Tzmecha 57861, right? Because this is the first one. We start this program every 2 months. So this is the first one of Tavshin Pei Vav. And then you see here, Thursday, 23rd of April, which is Vav Iyar. That's basically today. Mochen Tzmecha begins. And then as of Sunday, which is in 3 days from now, every week it tells you what to learn. So Sunday, the 26th of April, which is Tes Iyar, Hadlakas Neiros week 1, Siman Reish Samach Gimel Sifim Aleph through Ches. So that's the call it quota for the week. That includes shiurim, that includes Shulchan Aruch, everything which is in those sifim you have to learn. Then Hadlakas Neiros week 2, very straightforward. As you can see, what's bolded is the test. There's 4 tests throughout the course of the program, and we finish on Daled Nisan, right? Because next year is in leap year, so it actually is 12 months. That's why I finished a little bit early. If you don't mind, let me take questions at the end. All right, let's move to the next thing. All right, so Rabbi Prescott spoke a little bit about shiurim. Let me discuss. I just want to show you for a second what the shiurim look like and just point out a few things. Okay, so each thumbnail of the shiur looks like this, right? So as you can see, Shabbos certification, that's the name of the program. Kiddush is the name of the section, and then it gives you what siman and sif the shiur is on. It also tells you the number shiur, right? So this is shiur number 13 of the Shabbos certification program. And then the actual shiurim have basically 2 angles. So this is the normal angle when Rabbi Prescott's giving a shiur. And if you look in the bottom left corner, so all the way in the corner you see Siman Reish Sadik Aleph Beis. It's telling you basically what siman and what sif is currently under discussion. And then you see there's 3 lines in English. So this line in the middle in bold is the topic that's currently being discussed by the Maggid Shiur. So in this case, it's should one eat Suda Shlishis before or after davening mincha. Underneath that is the next topic, so which is reading Sif Beis and Sad, and on top of that is the previous topic of discussion. This is so that you can keep track exactly of what's being spoken about in the shiur. Additionally, one other thing to point out with the shiurim is that when the Maggid Shiur is reading inside the Shulchan Aruch, the text will come up on the screen, so you can read along with him. Okay, I always like to include a section which is called how should you go about learning, because it's primarily relevant for the beginning. So people are starting the program. If you've been a Talmid and Machon Smecha before, you probably don't have this problem. But if you have not, it could be a little bit overwhelming. You receive this book, you have an account on our website, there's a lot going on. So this is my suggestion. You don't have to do this whatsoever. And I'm sure with time, everybody will, figure out a way of learning that works for them. But just for the beginning, if you're unsure what to do, this is my prescription. The first thing to do is watch the shiur. You see the quota for the week, you watch the shiur for that topic. It generally comes out to about 2 shiurim a week. Then, if there's an introduction to the relevant sifim in the Shulchan Aruch, I call it study guide, but it means the Shulchan Aruch. You go through that. Then you learn the Mechaber Amah inside the Shulchan Aruch. Then you can learn the discussions and explanations. That's what I mean by rest of the information. And then, personally, maybe Rabbi Prescott, Rabbi Silverstein, or some of the other Rabbanim will disagree. If you don't have time or the capacity to learn everything inside, I would do Mogen Avram, Mishnah Berurah, and Shulchan Aruch Harav before doing the Taz. The Taz tends to be very long and also can get very complicated and not always so Nagea Lamaisa. So I would always do the Taz last. Obviously, you don't have to be learning it inside, because everything you need to know, everything that is covered, that's of substance that you need to know for the test, is covered by the English discussions and explanations. Okay, let's talk about tests. I know we're literally starting the program right now, but still, I know people get very nervous about tests and they want to know. So we might as well just get it out of the way. Okay, the first thing is that the quizzes unlock the test. So if you open up your account tonight and you try and take a test, it's not going to let you take a test. It's going to say you need to take the quizzes within that section in order to unlock the test. So let's say the first test is on the first sefer, right? So Kiddush, Hadlakas Neres, Kiddush, Sudas, and Havdalah. In order to unlock the test on that section, you need to take and pass all the quizzes within that section. And that's not because we're trying to give you a hard time, but that's because we actually want you to be ready to take the test. So if we make it such that you have to take and pass the quizzes, then people are actually ready. Okay, there's 4 tests in total, again, on each volume. All the tests, all the quizzes are all multiple choice. For quizzes and tests, the passing grade is 70%, and the tests themselves are timed, but they are open book. So they're open book, that makes it easier, but they're timed, so that makes it, a little bit more challenging. And the way the schedule works is that there's a week of Chazorah before each test, and then there's a week to take the test. Now, the test is only 90 minutes. So we're giving you a week to take a 90-minute test so that if you want more time for Chazorah, you take the test at the end of the week, and then effectively you had 2 weeks for Chazorah, right? Because you had a week of Chazorah, then you have a week to take the test. But if you take the test on the last day of that week, then you had 2 weeks for Chazorah. Um, okay, let me show you how the accounts on the website work very quickly. All right, so assuming you have registered for the program. Again, I know some people are in different places here, but assuming you've registered, you've been accepted, you have paid, you will have an account on our website. The way you access it is you go on machon.com and you click your My Account. If you're not logged in, it'll say sign in. But once you're logged in, it'll say My Account. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. Um, let's load it up. All right, so here you will see My Account. This says sample student account, but obviously your account will say your name. Um, Moishi Cohen, whatever your name is. Over here is where you can update your subscription, payments, addresses, v'chulu. I'm not going to bother with it. You can log out, change your password. I'm not going to bother with that for now. I am going to click on where it says your courses, Shabbos certification program. You can click on it. All right, when you click on it, you will see that the Shabbos certification program, you can see here, first of all, there's a bar here which says 0% complete. As you progress through the program and take tests, go through shiurim, etc., and mark things off as complete, the bar will fill up till eventually the day you finish, it'll be at 100%. All right, let me actually click on one of these things and enter into the actual course portal. So the first thing you'll see, there's a sidebar going down the left. So if I can draw your attention to that, you see something called Welcome and General Info. I'm not really going to go through that now. It just says a bunch of things. Welcome to the Shabbos Certification Program, recording of programs. Welcome Zoom. That's where I'm going to post what's happening right now. I'll post the recording. There's a video about how to use your account, how to structure your learning, all pretty straightforward stuff. Then you have an introduction followed by the 10 topics that the program covers. So introduction has shiurim, introduction to halacha, who's who on a page of Shulchan Aruch, introduction to Hilchah Shabbos, and a quiz. I'm not really going to go through the introduction. What I do want to focus on are the actual units. The actual units where you're going to be spending most of the bulk of your time all look exactly the same. They have 3 sections: shiurim, Shulchan Aruch, quiz, shiurim, Shulchan Aruch, quiz, shiurim, Shulchan Aruch, quiz. And that's where you're going to find everything, right? So if you click on shiurim, you'll see you have all the shiurim for the Hadlakas Neiros section here, right? Just one after the other. Very straightforward. You watch them. There's the Shulchan Aruch, which is the Shulchan Aruch for that section. If you don't have your book or you're traveling or whatever it is, you left your book somewhere, you can log into your account and you can learn on the computer. You will not be able to download it. That's true. Obviously, we need to protect, our Svarim, so we don't allow people to download it, but you can still learn it. And then there's also a quiz that you can take on the section. There'll probably be, if there's more than one simon, there'll be multiple quizzes. It looks like it's not here yet. All right, and then it's the same thing for each one. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom, you see there are all the tests, which eventually, when you're ready to take them, you will